Now, I don't know if you guys noticed, but when Casey speaks about Kaylee Anthony, she's referring to her in the past tense, and at times she catches herself saying was and then saying is. I don't know if you guys caught that, but also take note that the times where Casey's getting emotional and she's wiping her eyes and sniffling, it's always about her. How she misses her family and things like that. As to when her father came in with a picture of her missing baby girl's face on a shirt. She had no emotion whatsoever. Once again, not asking if there's any progress in the investigation. Have they found Kaylee? Nothing like that. Now, this case was incredibly publicized. It was on the news almost every day, and if there was any progress in the case. And this is where she gains the nickname, the most hated woman in America. Because everybody thinks that she did it at this point in time. I mean, who waits 31 days to report their daughter missing, and it's on the news that she's lying to the police about where she works, lying about Zanny the nanny, who, by the way, Casey at this point in time is still claiming exists, even though they've debunked that she isn't real.
Never searched by her full name. They searched by Zenaida Fernandez or Zenaida Gonzalez, never by her full name.
And it's Z-E-N.
Z-E-N-A-I-D-A. I don't think she has a middle name. There was never a middle name on anything that I remember seeing. And I know she went by both last names. She always has. Since she was younger, since her mom remarried.
So Flores Gonzalez, and you don't know what her stepdad's.
Fernandez Gonzalez.
But you don't know what Fernandez Gonzalez.
I think her dad's first name is Victor. Her stepdad. Or that could be her real dad. But I remember her saying Victor. Victor and Gloria were her parents.
Victor and Gloria are her parents. But they're separated. Or divorced.
They are as of now, yeah. That was her stepdad. Divorced. But I know she has a lot of money. That's where she got the car from.
I only get one or two phone calls a day that, that are not nice phone calls. But I get many, many, many phone calls and many people reaching out that just believe in you. They believe in us finding Kaylee. Okay? So keep your head up high. But if you think of anything that could help, don't be afraid.
Oh, I won't hesitate to let you guys know.
You have to keep thinking positive. Positive feelings, Casey.
Oh, I know. I have been. I've been staying as positive as I can.
Is at this point in time where, unfortunately, Casey hires her attorney named Jose Baez. He is now known to be, one of the sleazy lawyers who gets bad people out of jail time. And one of the first thing he does is he appeals the no bail, which worked. But the judge was like, okay, we'll appeal it, but we'll go ahead and set it to $500,000. Nobody's going to pay $500,000 to get this woman out of jail, right? No. Some rich guy bails her out of jail, and he later states that he was hoping that maybe Casey could help with his investigation with finding her daughter, which, of course, she did not. So, on August 21st, Casey Anthony was released, and of course she had an ankle monitor, and she had specific rules about what she could and could not do. She could not leave the state, obviously, things like that. So, 5 months after Kaylee Anthony had disappeared, December 11th, 2008, this meter worker named Roy Kronk was a meter reader near where the Anthony's home was. And, while he was in the middle of work, when he had to go to the bathroom, he would just, go off into, the woods to use the bathroom. And while he was using the bathroom in the wilderness, he kept noticing this bag there. And, of course, he was kind of creeped out because there's just a bag laying in the middle of the woods. So he calls the police, and he's like, hey, there's this bag here. Can you guys just come check it out? It's kind of weirding me out. But the police never come out. About a month later, he's there, he's working, he's using the bathroom, he spots the same bag. He calls the police, guys, this bag is still here. Can one of you guys come and check it out? The police don't show up. Now this happens once more. He calls the police, and the police are finally like, okay, we'll go and check this out. But for some reason, they go when Roy isn't even there. They decide to go investigate on their own time whenever they felt like it, and they looked around a little bit and they said, there's no bag here, I don't see a bag. So they just leave. Going back to December 11th, Roy's back in the same wilderness. He sees the bag and he's like, you know what, I'm just gonna go ease my mind a little bit and check out and see what this bag is. So and he opens it and the first thing he sees is like some sort of like cloth looking thing. He picks up a stick and he's kind of like poking around in it. And that is when he uncovers bones. So this time it was actually Roy's boss that called the police. And he said, my worker has been reporting this bag for months now. And you guys have done nothing about it. Well, he just found a dead body in it. So can you guys come look at it now? And so, obviously, the police go out there and they take a look inside. It's like this big gray bag, and they take a look inside, and that is when they confirm it is child bones. Skipping ahead a little bit in time, not for long, just to say this one thing. I want to say that not long after Kaylee's body was discovered, Casey had told Robin Adams, her soulmate, that Kaylee was found inside a bag wrapped in a Winnie the Pooh blanket. The only problem being with her telling her soulmate that was the blanket was not public knowledge at this time. All Casey had access to was the news. They did not tell her anything about Kaylee being wrapped up in a blanket. So, I want to ask you guys, how did Casey know what Kaylee was found in? Like, when the skull was examined and recovered, they saw a strand of like duct tape, and it was wrapped all the way around, and it was covering the nose and the mouth. And on top of this duct tape was a heart-shaped sticker, and it was placed like right there, like where the mouth would be. Now, unfortunately, the cause of death cannot be established because it was just bones. There was no body to autopsy. The only thing the police knew for sure was that this was a homicide. Obviously, because there's not an accident where a baby's mouth is covered in duct tape and thrown in a bag and thrown into a swamp. To note that, of course, at this time they do confirm that the body is 2-year-old Kaylee Marie Anthony, and that her body was discovered a quarter of a mile away from the Anthony home, not even 10 minutes away. During this whole time, during the trial and everything, the parents were very supportive of Casey. They didn't believe she had anything to do with this. They were on her side. They were just confused and hurt on how this could happen to their 2-year-old little granddaughter, and they wanted to know who did it. The police go and they start investigating, obviously. So they go and investigate the car that Casey was driving, the one that was impounded. In the trunk of the car, they found like a strand of hair in the trunk. On that hair, at the very end of it, they found like a shadow of like a band, which this is called root banding, which is something that your hair does when you're dead. Your hair can no longer support nutrients, and it just starts to die. So then they bring in like this air specialist. I'm not sure like what the professional term for them is, but they bring in this air specialist to take samples of the air to test this air. And in their findings, they found alarmingly high results of chloroform. So high that the man stated that in his 20 years of working there, he's never seen a result where this amount of chloroform was found. That's how high it was. Now, of course, the investigators wanted to debunk the fact of, like, well, maybe at the car pound they used cleaning products in the cars. So they go to the pound and they go, and the air specialist collects these samples from the cars, but zero amount of chloroform was found in these cars. So, of course, that defeats that it was cleaning supplies argument. The police also confiscated Casey's laptop, and they discovered on the day after Casey said that she supposedly took Kaylee to the nanny, there was a Google search for suffocation. A minute after that first Google search, there was a search for foolproof suffocation. Later that same day, on June 16th, her and her boyfriend were caught on CCTV footage of like a blockbuster. And they were just like renting a movie, but in that footage, Kaylee was nowhere to be seen. Now, her Google search history also showed that Casey had been Googling chloroform for a long time. How to make chloroform at home, more specifically, how to make it yourself. There was over 80 different searches on chloroform, just like searching chloroform and then clicking on things, like over 80 different times. Also, at one point in time, she had searched neck breaking. Now, I want to also state that Casey denied that she was even home to be making these Google searches, but that was later debunked when there was a ping of her phone at the Anthony house where her laptop was at the same time that those searches were being made. Anthony's attorney, Jose Baez, also somehow got Cindy Anthony to kind of say that it was her. She stated that the dog had eaten chlorophyll, which is like a gardening thing, and as she was searching chlorophyll, maybe she somehow ended up on chloroform. But this also was later debunked when it was proven that Cindy Anthony was at work at the time that these Google searches were made. So the evidence all points to Casey Anthony made those Google searches. The police also found Casey Anthony's diary, which had a weird entry in it that was a week, less than a week actually, during Kaylee's disappearance. And I'll just put it on the screen here for you guys to read and check out. Why was Casey Anthony so supposedly happy during her daughter's been missing and she's happy? I don't know, guys. In time, you might be wondering, Casey said she was just trying to do this herself the whole month that Kaylee was missing. Maybe she was going door to door asking about Zanny, or honestly, I don't know what she would be asking about since it was proven that Kaylee was never at Zanny's house because Zanny never existed. But I don't know. Maybe she was looking for her daughter some way. No, she was not. This whole month that Kaylee Anthony was missing, Casey Anthony was out partying, having the time of her life every single night, just living it up, all while her 2-year-old daughter is missing. And during this time, she also got a tattoo on her shoulder that states Bella Vita, which translated means beautiful life. This is something that I still can't wrap my head around, which I'll be stating later why she states that she was doing this in her 2022 documentary. But even that excuse that she gives then, it doesn't make sense. You don't know where your daughter is. You don't know how your daughter's doing. You're out partying every night instead of looking, searching, doing anything you can to find her. You don't even know if she's okay, but you're having the time of your life. Now, in this point in time, the officers also find that the duct tape that was wrapped around Kaylee's head was also the same duct tape that was in the garage of the Anthony household. May 24th, 2011, a couple years after Kaylee's body was discovered, the trial begins. Now, the prosecution was going for the death penalty, but to do that, they had to convince the jurors that beyond reasonable doubt, Casey Anthony murdered her daughter. Now, the prosecution's story was Casey Anthony somehow got this chloroform, preferably specifically more so making it herself, as her Google searches suggest. And remember, there was tests done that a substantial amount of chloroform was found in the trunk of the car. The same trunk of the car that had the hair in it, the same trunk in the car that George, the worker at the pound, and Cindy Anthony once stated smelled like a dead body. They say that Casey used this to knock Kaylee Anthony unconscious, and then she wrapped duct tape around her nose and her mouth to stop her from breathing, and then suffocation was probably the way that Kaylee Anthony had died. They then state that she wrapped her up in Kaylee's favorite blanket, the Winnie the Pooh blanket, and placed her in a trash bag and in a hockey bag, put the bag in the trunk, and was driving around with it. And when the smell was getting too much, that she just ditched the car and took the bag and threw the body of Kaylee Anthony into the swamp. They tell the court and the jurors that the motivation behind Casey possibly murdering her daughter was that she simply just didn't want to be a mother anymore. Remember in the beginning where I stated that Casey initially wanted to give this baby up for adoption, and if you're wondering why she did it, it was because her parents encouraged her to not do that. Anyways, remember that she didn't even want to have this baby because she wanted to continue her lifestyle. Well, the prosecution says something similar to that she just didn't want the responsibility of being a mother, and she wanted to go out and have fun and party, and that she just felt she couldn't do that with Kaylee around. So instead of, I don't know, having the grandparents watch her or filing to get Kaylee a different guardian, she just decided to kill her. They then later called one of Casey Anthony's friends to the stand, and this friend states that all these nights during this whole month that Kaylee was supposedly missing, that Casey's behavior didn't seem to change. She was happy and she was out partying. She never once seemed down and out or like something was bothering her. Now, unfortunately, at that point in time, all the evidence that they had were circumstantial. There was no significant aha moments that pinned. I mean, there was, obviously, but in the court's eye, there isn't anything that pinned Casey to Kaylee's murder. Now, Casey's lawyer, Jose Baez, states that Kaylee, in fact, was not murdered, that she had accidentally slipped and drowned in the family pool, and that George Anthony, Kaylee's father, was actually the one who found Kaylee in the pool and freaked out and picked her up and said that his first thought was that his daughter was going to get in trouble and get arrested for this. So he decides to cover it up. Casey goes into this in this 2017 short, like, mini interview she did, where she states, "He was standing there with her and handed her to me, stating that it was my fault. He was just standing there and he wasn't trying to revive her." Was a direct quote from that interview. On the stand, she states that during the 31 days she was out partying because she was convinced that Kaylee was fine. That George had told her that Kaylee was okay, even though she states that she had seen her lifeless body and held her lifeless body and that she was cold and limp. She said that she thought Kaylee was okay and that George was giving her instructions on what to say and do. So that's what she stated. Does it make sense that a former homicide detective's first thought isn't, oh my god, my granddaughter just accidentally drowned in this pool? It's, oh my god, my daughter's going to get in trouble. Let me go and cover this up. I don't know. You would also think that being a homicide detective, he, if he wanted to cover up a murder, he would do better than ditching a body less than 10 minutes away from his own house. Jose Baez, Casey Anthony's lawyer, states that the reason why she, Casey, was lying was because it was a coping mechanism. He states that since Casey Anthony was 8 years old, that her father, George Anthony, had begun to SA her. He states that that is where she had learned to lie, and that's where lying became a coping mechanism. Casey then states that she thinks that George was also doing the same thing to Kaylee, specifically on the day of the murder, and that he freaked out and drowned her in the pool. Now, I want to state that these allegations that they had brought up in court, there's no evidence. George Anthony, Cindy Anthony have denied having anything to do with Casey's death, and in fact, they also did a little documentary after Casey Anthony's 22 documentary, doing a lie detector test where it was proven that they had nothing. Well, I guess proven, I have to say that because it's a lie detector test, but the test came back that they had nothing to do with what happened to Kaylee Marie Anthony. They also stated the same thing about this SA thing, saying that her brother Lee was also doing this to Casey, and once again, these allegations were never confirmed or had any evidence. Jose Baez also states that Roy had contaminated the evidence of Kaylee's body by opening it and poking it around with a stick, and that it contaminated the evidence so that I don't know what that had to do with anything, but that is what Jose went with. Yes, it is a different day, and yes, I have gotten a haircut. But we're gonna continue with the video now. Actually, she was found guilty on one thing, and that was giving false information to the police. And originally, it was on 4 counts, and she had to pay a $1,000 fine each and serve 1 year in prison. So that's consecutively given 4 counts. But once again, unfortunately, her lawyer got that bumped down to 2 counts because he ended up saying, well, some of these lies are like the same lie, so can we just bump it down a little bit? So unfortunately, they did bump it down to only 2 counts of giving false information to the police. And even more sadness, Casey Anthony altogether only ended up serving 10 days in prison. They did this because the whole time her trial was, she was in police custody. So they added all that up, and plus this new sentence that she was given, and that bumped that down to only 10 days in prison. But on the bright side of things, there's one good thing that came from this whole trial, and that is Kaylee's Law. Uh, some states are still having it written into law, I think. I'm pretty sure. But some of them already do. And what Kaylee's Law is, it can be a felony if you're a parent or guardian and your child goes missing and you don't report it as soon as they go missing. You can get prison time for that. Alabama actually having one of the most longest times you can serve in prison, which is 10 years. After this whole trial, Casey Anthony cut off her entire family. Um, Probably because she just threw her family under the bus to get away with murder. All in all, that was the case of Kaylee Anthony. Now, in 2022, the first time that Casey Anthony decided to rejoin the public eye, she made a documentary called Where the Truth Lies, where she brought up some new allegations. Now, in this documentary, there were some new allegations. Allegations, that's what they are. Um, but some of them were still kind of going out based off of what she said in her trial and in her 2017 interview. She's still going with the whole George drowned Kaylee in the pool, but her story just keeps changing. Now, in her trial, she stated that she took a nap, and when she woke up, George was in her room holding Kaylee's body that was soaking wet. Now, remember, in her trial, she said that they were outside when this happened. There's one part where the dots are not connecting. She almost as if she wrote this line down somewhere and was rehearsing it for her whole life since the trial. So something that's basically along the same lines that she did in her trial. She says, "She was soaking wet. I can see him standing there with her in his arms and hand her to me, telling me it's my fault and that I did it." In her trial, she stated that while this was happening, they were outside, and she did this whole dramatic thing where she said she dropped to her knees and was just sobbing. But this time she's saying that this is happening in the house. She states that George ends up taking her somewhere, saying that he's going to take care of things. And she states that that whole 31 days, the reason why she didn't call the authorities or why she was out partying was because George stated that Kaylee was fine and that Kaylee was okay. Now I'm going to interject here and just state how this doesn't make any sense. First of all, if what Casey was stating was true, I couldn't see how you could say that she was limp, she looked dead, she was soaking wet, she was cold. I don't understand how you could see that and say that you've seen that, and then for a whole month not going without seeing your daughter, asking your daughter how she is, and things of that nature. I don't understand how you could be out partying, have a good time, being happy. I just don't understand that. Also, wants all these eyes on her, probably more so to make money, and probably because she loves the infamously. But I want to turn everyone's attention towards Kaylee Marie Anthony. Grandmother Sydney said that Kaylee was a beautiful little girl who had a smile that could light up a room. She was full of energy and curiosity, always exploring and learning new things. She loved to sing and dance, and her favorite song was "You Are My Sunshine." Mother George states that Kaylee was our sunshine. She brought so much joy and happiness into our lives. She had a special way of making everyone around her feel loved and cherished. Her laughter was contagious, and her spirit was pure and innocent. Kaylee's Uncle Lee says Kaylee had a unique personality that was a blend of sweetness and spunk. She was a little adventurer, always eager to discover the world around her. She had a heart full of love and a smile that can melt anyone's heart. To anyone who is willingly giving Casey Anthony money on Substack, we're all entitled to our own opinions, and if you think that Casey Anthony didn't do it, then that's on you. But I want you to remember that this is the little girl that had lost her life and her life was cut short, and that her killer is still walking amongst us. And after seeing this whole video, every single penny that Casey Anthony is given is a penny that is voting not guilty.
Hi, sweetie. We're not doing well, Case. Someone just said that Kaylee was dead this morning.
Surprise, surprise.